The heavy iron gates of the maximum security prison creaked open, letting out a thin, middle-aged woman. Imani Dio stood at the start of a new life with one hot wish: to forget the 8 years of bad dreams that had changed her from a happy wife into the person people thought killed her own husband. The September sun hurt her eyes, as they were not used to the bright light. Held in her hands were a beat-up duffel bag with her few things and an envelope full of cash. She had saved it working for years in the prison's sewing shop. Only $30,000, all the money she had. After 8 years inside, Imani walked slowly down the dusty path from the prison to the bus stop. Each step felt heavy, not in her body but in her heart. The world had changed in those years, but she was still the 30-year-old woman arrested for maybe killing her husband. Now she was 38, and ahead of her was a scary unknown. The memories of that awful night still bothered her. 8 years ago, she and Cairo had fought about money. He came home late, smelling of alcohol and a strange cologne. Imani yelled at him, wanting to know where he was spending their family's savings. Cairo yelled back sharply. He started waving his hands, and after that she only remembers a sharp pain in the back of her head and then nothing. She woke up to the sound of ambulance and police sirens. Cairo lay on the floor in a pool of blood. Next to him was a bloody fireplace poker. Neighbors who heard the screams and noise had called for help. "You killed your husband in a moment when you weren't yourself," Detective Darius King said the next day. The proof was strong. Her fingerprints were on the poker, her husband's blood was on her clothes, and neighbors told about their fights. Her public defender, a young new lawyer given by the state, didn't even try to put up a real defense. 8 years in a maximum security prison for killing without meaning to in a moment of anger. The judge said the sentence. Imani remembered her legs giving way, the courtroom going blurry. She screamed that she was innocent, that she didn't remember how it happened, but no one listened. In prison, the first few months were the hardest. Imani couldn't believe that she could kill anyone, especially Cairo, who she had once loved. Yes, their marriage had been breaking up for the last 2 years. Yes, her husband had started drinking and coming home late, but killing him seemed impossible. In time, she learned to live in the prison. She worked in the sewing shop, read books from the small library, and wrote letters to the few friends she had left. Slowly, the letters became fewer, and then stopped completely. People forget. It's normal. The only good spot in the gray prison days was her friendship with Ayana, an older woman in prison for a money crime. Ayana became Imani's teacher, almost a mother. It was Ayana who taught her never to lose hope and to believe in justice. "Nita," Ayana would tell her using her nickname, "the truth always rises to the top like oil on water. You have to be ready for that moment." Ayana had been let out on parole 3 years ago. As a goodbye gift, she gave Imani a small medallion of Saint Teresa and whispered, "When you get out, the first thing you must do is visit your husband's grave. Ask him for forgiveness, not for killing him, but for not being able to save him from the life he chose." Now, standing at the bus stop, waiting for a ride into the city, Imani held that same medallion tight in her pocket. The bus arrived 30 minutes late. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, felt sorry for her when he learned where she came from. "It's all right now, dear," he said. "Your life is just starting. The main thing is not to let anger grow inside." The trip to the city took 2 hours. Imani watched the passing view out the window, thinking about how she now had no home, no job, and no family. The apartment she and Cairo had rented was lost right after her arrest. Her parents had died before her marriage. She had no other family. In the city, she went straight to a flower shop. She picked a simple bunch of 6 white chrysanthemums, the only thing she could afford. The young salesperson looked curiously at her old clothes and pale face. "For a grave?" she asked kindly. "For my husband," Imani replied shortly. The cemetery was on the edge of the city. Imani got there on 2 different buses, saving every penny. It was almost evening when she finally reached the gates of Oakwood Memorial Park. The groundskeeper, a strong man about 45 years old, sat in his shed reading a newspaper. Seeing Imani with flowers, He nodded and waved her through. Cairo Dio's grave was in a far corner of the cemetery among simple plots without expensive stones. 8 years ago, Imani wasn't allowed to go to the funeral. She was being investigated. Now, for the first time, she saw her husband's final resting place. A simple metal plate with his name, last name, and dates of his life. Cairo Dio, beloved husband and son. Imani gave a bitter smile. Beloved husband, if the people who wrote those words knew how things really were. She knelt before the grave and started clearing the weeds that had grown during years of no care. No one had looked after the grave. Cairo's parents had died long ago. He had no other family. Imani carefully placed the flowers she brought and cried quietly. The tears weren't for the dead husband, but from the painful understanding that 8 years of her life were gone without a trace. 8 years stolen by an unfair sentence that could not be given back. She was only 30 when they arrested her, and now she was 38. The best years wasted for nothing. Imani was so focused on cleaning the grave that she didn't notice she was being watched. Only as the sun began to set and the evening coolness filled the air did she feel a steady look. Turning around, she saw a little girl hiding behind a nearby headstone. The girl was only about 6 years old, no more. Blonde hair braided into 2 pigtails, large gray eyes that held curiosity mixed with fear. She was dressed simply but cleanly in a plaid dress and a light jacket. "Hello," Imani called out softly, wiping her hands with a wet wipe. "What's your name?" The girl slowly came out from her hiding place but kept a safe distance. She clearly had been taught to be careful of strangers. "Lumi," the little one answered in a quiet voice. "And who are you? I've never seen you here." "I'm Imani. This is my husband's grave," the woman explained, pointing to the fresh flowers. "And what are you doing here so late? Where are your parents?" "Daddy works." The girl pointed toward the shed at the cemetery entrance. "We live here. Mommy died when I was little." Imani felt a stab of sympathy. The child was growing up among graves with a groundskeeper father. What kind of childhood could a little girl like that have? "And how old are you, Lumi?" "I turned 6 last month." The girl relaxed a little, seeing Imani's kind face. "Daddy says I'm starting school soon." In Imani's bag were some candies she'd bought, planning to eat them on the bus, but she hadn't touched them. Now she pulled out a shiny wrapper and offered it to the girl. "Would you like a piece of candy?" Lumi looked at the sweet distrustfully, but temptation was stronger than caution. She moved closer and took the candy. "Thank you," she said politely, immediately unwrapping it. "Sweetheart, has your dad worked here long?" Imani asked, hoping to start a conversation. "Yeah." The girl nodded, sucking on the candy. "My dad, Victor, says he's been the groundskeeper for 5 years now, and we live in the little house by the gate." So, this Victor started working here after Cairo died, Imani thought. But he might still know something or have heard something from the old groundskeeper. "And before your dad, did someone else work here?" "Grandpa Nick worked here." The girl chattered freely now, clearly wanting to talk to someone other than her father. "But he got sick and went to the hospital and then he passed away. Daddy says Grandpa Nick used to tell lots of interesting stories about the cemetery." Imani felt this conversation could be important. What if that Grandpa Nick knew something about Cairo's funeral? After all, he was buried 8 years ago, and Victor has only been working here for 5 years. And what kind of stories did Grandpa Nick tell? Lumi paused, thinking about the tales she'd heard from her father. Different things. About how spooky it is here at night, about bad people who come around, and also... The girl suddenly stopped and looked at Imani thoughtfully. "And also what?" Imani gently asked her to continue. "And also, Grandpa told Daddy that some of the graves here are strange. That not always what should be in them is actually in them." Imani's heart began to beat faster, but she tried not to show her worry. "What do you mean, not what should be in them?" Lumi shrugged. "I don't know. Daddy doesn't like talking about it much. He says Grandpa was just old and made things up." The girl looked hard at Cairo's grave, then back at Imani. "Auntie Imani, Is it true that your husband is buried here? Of course it's true. Why do you ask? Lumi moved closer to Imani and lowered her voice to a whisper. Auntie, there's nobody in there. Do you want me to tell you a secret? Daddy Victor said he saw them take something out of this grave at night. Men came in a big car. Imani's hands shook. She struggled to stay calm. When was that, sweetheart? I don't know exactly. Daddy wasn't telling me. He was telling his friend, Uncle Boris. They thought I was asleep, but I was listening. The girl smiled guiltily. Daddy said it was maybe 3 or 4 years ago. He wanted to chase them away at first, but they gave him money. A lot of money. Imani felt dizzy. If what the little girl was saying was true, someone had opened Cairo's grave. But why? And what could they have taken from there? Lumi, are you sure your dad was talking about this grave? She pointed to Cairo's headstone. The girl nodded. Yes, I know it well. It's close to our little house, and I pass by here often. Daddy told Uncle Boris that the men dug right here near the metal plate. Imani rose from her knees and looked around. The cemetery was emptying out. Most visitors had left. In the distance, she could see the groundskeeper making his rounds before closing. Sweetheart, can I talk to your dad? The girl became worried. Why? You won't tell him I told you about the grave, will you? He'll be mad at me then. I won't tell him. Promise. I just want to ask if they need any help here. Maybe I could do some work. This was only half the truth. Imani needed to stay in the city for at least a few days to find out more about what she'd heard, but she had almost no money. A job at the cemetery didn't seem great, but right now she couldn't be picky. Daddy! Lumi shouted loudly, waving toward the approaching man. There's an auntie here who wants to talk to you. Victor walked toward them with an even step. He was a man about 45, of average height with a simple, open face and watchful brown eyes. He was wearing overalls and work boots. Good evening, he greeted her politely. Victor's the name. I came to visit someone, my husband. Imani pointed to the grave. I just arrived in the city recently. I wanted to ask if you need any help here. I can clean up, water the flowers, whatever. Victor looked her over carefully. It was clear he was used to judging people by how they looked and acted. Have you worked anywhere before? I have, Imani answered without details. I have different experience. The last few years were at a cloth factory. Lumi, go home, the father told his daughter seriously. The girl walked slowly toward the shed, looking back at Imani. You understand, Imani, that the work here is special. Different people come here. Not all of them are normal. You have to know how to calm some people down and put others in their place if needed. I understand. Imani nodded. I'm not afraid of hard work. And where will you live? Do you have an apartment? Imani expected this question and had an answer ready. For now, I'm renting a room from people I know, but if the work is for good, I'll rent my own place. Victor stayed quiet, thinking about it. All right, come back tomorrow morning. We'll try it for a week. I won't pay much, but the work isn't hard. The main thing is to be responsible and honest. Thank you so much. Imani was truly relieved. What time should I come? At 8 o'clock in the morning. The cemetery opens at 9 o'clock, but before that, we need to check everything and sweep up any trash. As Imani left the cemetery, her thoughts were a mess. The little girl Lumi's story could be a child's made-up tale, but something told her the girl was serious. Children her age rarely make up such details. If Cairo's grave was really opened, why? What were they looking for there? And most importantly, who were those people who came at night with money for the groundskeeper? Imani walked through the dark city streets toward the bus stop, and for the first time in 8 years, she felt like she had a goal. Maybe she could finally find out the truth about that terrible night that ruined her life. The next morning, Imani was at the cemetery exactly at 8. She had spent the night in a cheap motel near the bus station, the only place she could afford, as the future was unsure, and she needed to save cash. The room was tiny and not very clean, but it gave her a roof over her head and time to think. Victor was already waiting for her by the entrance, drinking from a thermos. Seeing Imani, he nodded and handed her a bucket. "We'll start with the main paths," he explained. "We need to rake up the fallen leaves and sweep the walkways. Then we'll check the trash cans. We had a lot of visitors yesterday, so there's probably a lot of trash." The work turned out to be less tiring than she expected. Imani was used to physical work from prison, so she worked quickly and well. Victor watched her with approval. "You have working hands." "That's clear," he said during a break. "Where did you work before? If it's not a secret." Imani had expected this question and prepared a believable answer. "Different places. The last few years at a cloth plant. Closed down recently. Had to look for a new job." "I see. There are job problems everywhere now." After lunch, when the flow of visitors slowed, Imani decided to carefully bring up the subject that interested her. "Victor, you've worked here long. Going on the 5th year now. Before me it was Grandpa Nick, bless his soul. He was a good man. Taught me a lot. And he passed away. Yeah, about 2 years ago. Age, sickness, almost made it to 80. Victor sighed. "He used to tell me all sorts of stories about the cemetery. It was interesting to listen." "What kind of stories?" Victor looked closely at Imani as if deciding whether he could trust her with such information. "All kinds. About unusual visitors, about strange cases. He used to say he'd seen everything in 30 years of working here." "And what do you mean by strange cases?" Imani tried to keep her tone casual. Victor paused, clearly not sure whether to continue the topic. "Well, sometimes the family of the dead person acted suspicious, or the other way, someone would be interested in a grave of a person who wasn't their family. Grandpa Nick was always watchful. He remembered those things." "And what did he do in those cases?" "What could he do? Our job is to mind our own business. The main thing is order, and that the graves aren't damaged." Imani decided to take a risk and ask a more direct question. "Victor, has it ever happened that graves were opened, officially or not?" The groundskeeper immediately became tense. He put down his broom and stared at Imani. "Why do you ask? What does that have to do with you?" "Just curious. I thought that only happened in movies." "All sorts of things happen," Victor replied vaguely. "Sometimes family decide to move the remains. Sometimes the police need the grave opened. But all that is official with papers. And unofficially." Victor was silent for a long time, clearly fighting with himself. Finally he sighed heavily. "Imani, you seem like a straight-up person. I'll tell you how it is. Yes, it has happened. Once during my time here, some people came at night, offered me money, asked me not to get in the way and not to tell anyone. And you accepted. What was I supposed to do? They offered me money that I don't make in half a year. And I have a daughter growing up. She'll be going to school soon, then college. It's tough raising her alone." Imani felt her breathing get faster, so Lumi wasn't making it up. "And what were they looking for in the grave?" "I don't know, and I didn't want to know. They asked me to leave for a few hours. I did. When I came back, everything was carefully filled back in and cleaned up. No traces left." "Do you remember which grave it was?" Victor tensed again. "Why are you so interested? I don't get these questions." Imani realized she was pushing too hard. She needed to act more carefully. "I'm sorry if the questions seem odd. It's just that I've never worked in a cemetery before, so I'm curious." "All right." Victor relaxed a little. "Just don't tell anyone about this. If the bosses find out I was involved in that kind of stuff, I'll be fired." "Of course I won't say anything." The rest of the day passed with normal tasks. Imani helped visitors find the right plots, swept the paths, and watered flowers on forgotten graves. She even enjoyed the work. After the closed-in feeling of prison, being outside was a relief. In the evening, after the cemetery closed, Imani went to the city library. She needed to find information that might shine a light on the facts of Cairo's death. The library had internet, and Imani decided to look at local newspaper archives. The librarian, an older woman with glasses, helped her find the right section. Imani looked through the electronic archives of the city newspaper from the year Cairo died. In the March 15th issue there was a small note: "Killing in the city, fight at home leaves man dead. Cairo Dio, 31, died from hurt got during a fight with his wife. Suspect held." Imani kept looking, searching for any mention of herself or her husband. A month after the killing, in the April 18th issue, her attention was caught by a completely different article. Bank of the Americas branch robbed. $50 million taken. Criminals stole a large sum of money from the safe. About $50 million. Police looking for the guilty ones. Imani read the note several times. The Bank of the Americas was where Cairo worked. He had been the branch manager there for several years. Could this be just chance? She kept studying the archives. In later newspaper issues, there were several more articles about the bank robbery. The police hit a dead end. The criminals left no clues and had worked like pros. Security cameras were turned off and the alarm was blocked from the inside. This suggested the robbery was done by someone who knew the bank's security system well. The April 25th issue had an interview with the bank's head boss. "We didn't just lose money, we lost one of our best workers." Cairo Dio was an experienced manager. His death was a hard hit to all of us. Maybe if he had been alive, such a robbery wouldn't have happened. Imani felt goosebumps on her skin. The link between her husband's death and the bank robbery seemed more than just suspicious. Cairo dies in strange ways, and a month later, the bank where he worked is robbed. This could not be just chance. She kept searching and found another interesting detail. In the May 2nd issue, there was a small note saying that the police were asking anyone with information about Cairo Dio's work contacts to come forward. The note said that the dead man might have had information that could help solve the robbery. Imani printed all the materials she found and put them in her bag. The library's hours were ending, but she had gotten what she was looking for. Now she had many more questions than answers. Going back to the motel, she thought about the information she'd gotten. If Cairo was somehow involved in the bank robbery, then his death might not have been an accident. But who and why would have killed him? And most importantly, if he's dead, who robbed the bank? In the motel room, Imani spread the printed sheets on the bed and tried to put together a logical chain of events. Cairo works at the bank, has access to security system information. He is killed in March. The bank is robbed in April. Several years later, someone opens his grave at night. Why? The only explanation she could think of sounded unbelievable. What if Cairo wasn't dead? What if his death was a trick and someone else is lying in that grave? The idea seemed crazy to Imani, but the more she thought about it, the more logical it all became. Cairo could have faked his own death to rob the bank without trouble and run away. And she, the only witness to those events, was framed for murder. But how was that done technically? She remembered the blood, her husband's body lying still. Was it all a cleverly set-up scene? Imani lay down but couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with more and more incredible thoughts. Tomorrow she absolutely had to talk to someone who remembered Cairo, who knew about his work at the bank. Maybe his old co-workers could give important information. In the morning when she got to work, Imani decided to question Victor in more detail about the night the grave was opened. She chose a moment when there were few visitors in the cemetery. "Victor, yesterday you told me about the people who came at night. Did you see them? Do you remember what they looked like?" The groundskeeper became uneasy. "Why are you interested? Not every day you hear something like that." "I saw them. Two middle-aged men, one tall, thin, in an expensive suit, the other shorter and wider in a leather jacket. They spoke politely, not like criminals." "What did they drive?" "A black SUV. I didn't notice the license plate. Didn't even try." "And what did they tell you?" Victor paused, remembering. "The tall one said they needed to get something from the grave. Said it was a family matter, that the dead person was a relative. But I know all the plots here. That dead man had no family." "Which dead man?" Imani tried to speak as calmly as possible. The Dio one. Huro. I remember the last name because it's not common. He was a young man. Such a shame. Imani's heart started pounding so hard she feared Victor would hear it. Her suspicions were right. Cairo's grave really had been opened. And what could they have been looking for there? I don't know. Maybe some valuable things were buried with the dead person. That happens. People put gold, cash in the coffin and then the family regret it and decide to get it back. But you said he had no family. He didn't. That's why the whole thing was strange. But they offered so much money that I decided not to get involved. Imani nodded, pretending the topic no longer interested her. But inside, everything was churning. Now she was almost sure that she had been the victim of a monstrous plan. After work, she went to the apartment she had shared with Cairo. They had rented the place on Park Avenue in a 5-story brown building. Imani remembered the address by heart. The building was still there, looking even more run down than 8 years ago. Imani climbed to the second floor and knocked on the door of the apartment across from her old one. Her neighbor, Valentina, an older woman who always knew all the neighborhood news, lived there. Valentina, looking older and much weaker, opened the door. Seeing Imani, she cried out and put her hand to her chest. My God, Imani, they let you out. Hello, Valentina. Yes, I'm out now. Come in. Come in. Oh, what a joy to see you. The old woman led Imani into the small but cozy kitchen and immediately put the kettle on. Tell me, how are you? How's your health? Oh, how I worried about you all these years. Thank you. Tell me, Valentina, do you remember that night when everything happened? The elderly woman's face became dark. How could I forget? It was awful. Screaming, noise. Then the police and the ambulance came. The whole building was in an uproar. And do you remember if anyone came to visit us that day before everything happened? Valentina thought. Yes, I think someone came in the late afternoon. A man. I don't remember exactly what he looked like, but I remember he was wearing a suit, dressed nicely. And what did he do? I don't know. He didn't stay long. Maybe half an hour. Then he left. How did he leave? In some dark car. I saw it from the window, but I couldn't make out the license plate. This information seemed very important to Imani. So, on the day of the killing, someone visited them. Possibly the very person who helped Cairo fake his death. Valentina, do you happen to remember Cairo's business partner? He used to visit us sometimes. Maxwell Theon. Oh, yes, Maxwell. I remember him. A disagreeable man, always so serious. I didn't like him. And after they arrested you, did he ever come back around? No, I didn't see him again. And who would he come to see? The apartment was empty. The landlord later found other renters. Saying goodbye to Valentina, Imani headed to the city center. She needed to find information about Maxwell Theon and find out where he was now. In the city records, Imani managed to find some information about Maxwell Theon. According to the papers, he was a businessman involved in buildings and owned several companies. After Cairo's death, he closed all his businesses and left the city. Imani found the address of his old office in an old phone book. The building was in the city's business district on the 3rd floor of an office building. Imani decided to go there, hoping to find someone who remembered Theon. The office building looked very nice. On the 3rd floor, the space once used by Theon's company now held an advertising agency. Imani went in and approached the secretary. Good morning. Do you happen to know where Maxwell Theon's company moved to? It used to be here. Ah, Theon and Associates, the young woman said. They closed down a long time ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Why do you need them? I have a small unpaid bill. I'd like to settle it. Try asking the office next door. There's a tax firm there. They've been here a long time. Maybe they know something. In the next office, Imani was met by the head tax person, Olivia, a woman about 50 with sharp grey eyes and neat hair. I remember Theon, she said when Imani repeated her request. He was an unpleasant person, and his company was suspicious. Suspicious in what sense? Olivia looked around, making sure no one was listening, and lowered her voice. The money movements were strange, sometimes suddenly a lot of cash, sometimes completely empty, and the clients were suspicious. I sometimes ran into them in the hallway, the kind of people you look away from quickly. And do you happen to know where he is now? Theon left somewhere. They said he went to another country, and a good thing, in my opinion. Why a good thing? Olivia looked around again. After that bank robbery, there was quite a fuss. The police checked all the businessmen who did business with that bank, and Theon was called in, too. And a month later, he vanished. Did he work with the Bank of the Americas? Yes, they had a large loan there and also did some money deals through that bank. I don't know exactly, but I overheard things. Imani felt the puzzle pieces starting to fit together. Theon worked with the same bank as Cairo. The bank was robbed a month after Cairo's death, and Theon disappeared right after the police started their checks. Olivia, do you happen to remember who else worked at the company? Maybe some contacts remained. There was a nice young female tax person working there. What was her name? Elena, I think. I don't recall the last name. And where can I find her? I have no idea. After the company closed, everyone scattered. Imani thanked the woman and left the office. There was little information, but it was something. The link between Theon and the bank was confirmed. Now she needed to find that tax person. Maybe she had more details. Imani spent the next 2 days searching. She went through different places where a young Elena with tax background might work. The task wasn't easy. There were many companies in the city and not all of them let her look at worker lists. Finally, at one of the checking firms, the secretary said, "Elena Vasquez, she works here." "What is this about?" "I'm a distant relative of hers. I'd like to meet with her." "She's not here right now. She's on a check at a client company, but she'll be back tomorrow. Come after lunch." The next day, Imani arrived at the set time. Elena Vasquez turned out to be a pretty young woman of about 28 with long dark hair and large brown eyes. When Imani introduced herself and explained that she was looking for information about Maxwell Theon, the young woman's face changed. "And who are you and why do you need information about Maxwell?" "It's a long story. Can we talk privately somewhere?" Elena paused, but curiosity won. "All right, I have a lunch break in an hour. Let's meet at the cafe across the street." At the cafe, Imani decided to tell the truth. Part of it, but the truth. "Elena, 8 years ago, I was found guilty of my husband's murder. My husband's name was Cairo Dio. He worked at the Bank of the Americas. I was recently let out and started my own search. It turns out your old boss, Theon, is somehow involved in that story." The young woman went pale. You're that Imani Dio they wrote about in the papers." "Yes, I am, but I'm innocent and trying to prove it." Elena was silent for a long time, thinking about what she'd heard. "I don't know if I should talk to you. This could be dangerous." "Dangerous in what way?" "Maxwell is not someone you want to be mixed up with. When I worked for him, I saw various suspicious things, such as..." Elena looked around, making sure no one was listening. "Large sums of cash passed through the company. I asked where such movements came from, and he said it was his personal business." "And what was that money?" "I don't know exactly, but I remember that in the last few months before the company closed, Maxwell was very nervous, constantly calling someone, going to meetings, and also..." The young woman stopped as if not sure to continue. "And also, he frequently mentioned your husband, Cairo Dio. I remember the last name because it's not common. Maxwell was talking to someone on the phone, and several times I heard, 'Dio agreed, Dio will fix it.' Something like that." Imani gasped. "This was shortly before Cairo's death." "Yes, literally a few days before. And then Maxwell came to work gloomier than a storm cloud. Said he had problems and that the company might have to close." "And after Cairo's death, did his behavior change in any way?" "He became paranoid, constantly looking around. He was afraid of phone calls. And he also started destroying papers, entire boxes of them. What papers? I don't know. He wouldn't let anyone near them, but I saw pieces. There were some contracts, bank papers. Elena, this is very important. Do you remember any details about Theon's relationship with the Bank of the Americas? The young woman became thoughtful. I remember he had a large loan there, $20 million, if not more, and they were also talking about some investment projects. Maxwell often went to the bank for meetings. Who did he meet with? I don't know exactly, but he mentioned the manager's name several times. Cairo, I think. Imani felt everything click into place in her mind. Cairo and Theon were definitely working together on something, and that something led to the bank robbery and the faked killing. Elena, do you know where Theon disappeared to? Officially nowhere. He just closed the company and vanished. But I heard from a friend that they saw him at the airport with a lot of luggage. That was right after the police started checking on the bank robbery. So he really did go to another country, Imani concluded. Most likely forever. After the talk with Elena, Imani no longer had any doubts. Theon and Cairo had planned the bank robbery, but something went wrong and Cairo had to fake his own death, and Theon got his share and ran away to another country. But one thing she still couldn't understand. Why was it necessary to open Cairo's grave? What could those people Victor saw have been looking for there? The answer to that question was probably in the grave itself. And Imani decided it was time to find out the whole truth. Imani spent the next few days thinking about how to get to the truth. The conversation with Elena gave a lot of information, but it didn't clear up the main point. If Cairo was alive, where could he be found? The only way to find out was to find people who might have a link to Theon. At the city hall, Imani found the address of Theon's old apartment. The house was in a fancy area. The apartment was a 3-bedroom high-end place. Other people lived there now, but the neighbors might remember something. A woman in the next apartment turned out to be talkative and curious. Theon. Yes, I remember that disagreeable fellow, always so serious. He lived alone, rarely had visitors, and then suddenly he disappeared, sold the apartment through real estate people. He didn't even show up for the final papers. Do you remember if he had any friends or people he knew? Sometimes a tall, thin man would visit. They talked about serious things, sometimes raising their voices. What did this man look like? Normal, middle-aged, in business clothes. But I remember he had a mole on his cheek, very noticeable. Imani thanked the neighbor and left. A mole on his cheek. This detail could be useful when looking for witnesses. That evening, going back from her work at the cemetery, Imani found Victor in a strange state. He was clearly upset and kept looking around. What happened, Victor? Some people came by today. They asked about you. Imani's heart skipped a beat. What people? 2 men said they were from management checking on new hires, but something about them felt off. What exactly felt off? They asked strange questions. They weren't interested in the work, but where you live, who you talk to, what you talk about. And what did you tell them? What could I tell them? I said you're a good, responsible worker. I don't know anything else about you. Victor was one of those men, tall, thin, with a mole on his cheek. The groundskeeper looked at her in surprise. How do you know? Yes, that's exactly what he looked like. And the second one, shorter, wider. Where do you know them from? Imani understood that her searches had not gone unnoticed. Someone was watching her, and that someone was clearly connected to the story from 8 years ago. Victor, if those people show up again, tell me right away and be careful. What's going on, Imani? What trouble have you gotten yourself into? I'm trying to find the truth about my husband's death. Maybe someone doesn't like that. Maybe you shouldn't dig up the past. It's dangerous. Maybe not. I served 8 years for someone else's crime. I have the right to know the truth. The next day, Imani decided to act with more care. She knew she was being watched and needed to be ready for anything. In the morning, when she got to work, she found Lumi, Victor's daughter, crying near the shed. What happened, sweetheart? Daddy is sick. He has a high fever. He's lying down. Imani went into the groundskeeper's small house. Victor lay in bed, pale. He was mumbling something unclear about some people, about money, about how he shouldn't have accepted it. "Lumi, I'm going to call an ambulance," Imani said. "In the meantime, you look after Daddy." When the ambulance people arrived, the doctor checked Victor and frowned. "Looks like poisoning. He needs to go to the hospital." Poisoning. What could he have been poisoned with? "It's not clear yet. We need tests." They took Victor to the hospital. Lumi stayed with Imani, who asked her friend from the motel to look after the girl. In the evening after the cemetery closed, Imani went to the hospital to visit Victor. He was awake but looked very weak. "Imani," he whispered. "Those people came again yesterday. After you left, they offered me some tea, said they were tired from traveling, and this morning I felt sick." "They poisoned you?" "It looks like it. And they also threatened me. Said if I keep telling anyone about that night when they opened the grave, Lumi will suffer." Imani felt a chill run down her spine. These people would stop at nothing. "Victor, you have to go to the police." "No," he said sharply. "I can't. I have a daughter. I can't put her in danger." "Then what should we do?" "Leave the city before it's too late. Those people are dangerous." But Imani couldn't leave. She was too close to the answer to give up now. Besides, if she left, who would protect Victor and Lumi? The next morning, working alone at the cemetery, Imani noticed a black SUV driving slowly along the road next to the fence. The car stopped at the entrance and two men got out, exactly the ones Victor had described. Imani quickly hid behind a large headstone and began to watch. The men walked straight toward Cairo's grave. The tall one with the mole on his cheek pulled out a phone and called someone. "She works here," he was saying. "Comes every day. The groundskeeper is in the hospital. We can make our move." The second man looked around. "And where is she now?" "She must be here. Her things are near the shed." Imani realized she had walked into a trap. There were only two exits from the cemetery, the main gate where those people were and the service gate on the other side, but it was locked and Victor had the keys. She moved quietly from monument to monument, trying to reach the service exit. Maybe she could climb over the fence, but as she got near the far part of the cemetery, she saw a third person standing near the service gate, the same wider man in the leather jacket Victor had described. Imani was trapped. Three clearly unfriendly men and nowhere to run. She had her phone in her pocket, but calling the police meant putting Lumi in danger. Suddenly, she heard a voice. "Imani, are you here?" It was Elena Vasquez, the tax person she had spoken with recently. The young woman had entered the cemetery through the main gate and was looking for Imani. "Elena," Imani whispered from behind the monument. "Quiet. There are dangerous people here." The young woman came closer and Imani quickly explained the situation. "Oh my God," Elena gasped. "What should we do?" "Do you have a car?" "Yes, it's in the parking lot." "Listen carefully. You're going to walk over to the main entrance now. Tell those men you're looking for the cemetery office. Distract them for a couple of minutes and I'll try to get over the fence. If they suspect anything, say you don't know them. Tell them you need a death paper for a relative for tax reasons." Elena nodded and headed toward the entrance. Imani watched as she spoke to the men, showing some papers from her bag. Seizing the moment, Imani quickly ran toward the fence in the far corner of the cemetery. The fence here was lower and didn't have barbed wire on top. She climbed over it, scraping her hands and tearing her clothes, but she made it out onto the street. A few minutes later, Elena caught up with her, breathing hard. "I told them I was looking for the office and they said the office is in the city. They seemed to believe it. Thank you so much. You saved my life." They quickly got into Elena's car and drove away. Only when the city was behind them did Imani feel relatively safe. "Elena, why did you come to the cemetery? How did you know where to find me?" The young woman smiled awkwardly. "After our conversation, I couldn't settle down. You mentioned getting a job at the cemetery. I kept thinking about what I told you about Maxwell and your husband and I decided I knew something else important and I needed to tell you. What exactly? Remember I said Maxwell was destroying papers? Well, he didn't destroy all of them. I have copies of some papers at home. I made them for tax reasons and then forgot to hand them over. Imani's heart pounded. What papers? Contracts with the Bank of the Americas and something else interesting. Maxwell's letters with a person named Alex Romano. Imani froze. Elena, this is very important. Where are those papers? At home in my closet. I haven't even read them closely. I just put them in a folder. They drove to Elena's apartment. The young woman lived in a studio apartment in a housing area. She pulled out a thick folder of papers from the closet. Here, look. There's everything. Contracts, papers, letters. Imani began to look at the papers. Most were normal business papers, but suddenly her attention was drawn to one sheet. It was a letter from Alex Romano to Maxwell Theon dated in March of the year Cairo died. Maxwell, everything is going according to plan. Tomorrow will be the accident after which I can act freely. In a month when things calm down, we will carry out the bank job. Your task is to provide the alibi and the ways for moving the money. After that, we meet at the set place and divide the money. Don't forget our agreement about the grave. In a few years, it will be necessary to get important papers from there. The letter was signed, A. Romano. Imani read the letter several times. There it was, written proof that Cairo had faked his own death. And now she knew they were looking for some important papers in his grave. Elena, do you understand what this means? No. What? It means my husband is alive. He faked his own death to rob the bank and escape, and I was framed for the killing of a person who didn't even die. The young woman gasped. But how is that possible? There was police checking, body identification. Apparently, it was all arranged. Someone else is lying in that grave, and Cairo is hiding under the name Alex Romano. So, what do we do now? We have to find Alex Romano and prove that he is my living husband. Imani understood that to prove her innocence, she needed more serious proof than a letter of doubtful origin. It was necessary to find out exactly who was buried in the grave under the name Cairo Dio. At the city hospital, her old medical school friend Chloe Nzinga worked. Imani remembered that Chloe worked in the body checking department. Maybe she could help with information about the body check of Cairo's body. Meeting Chloe at the hospital was risky. The people could be there. Imani asked Elena to find Chloe's home address and set up a meeting there. A day later, Elena reported that the meeting was set for the evening. Chloe lived in a private home on the city's edge with her husband and 2 children. Seeing Imani, Chloe couldn't hide her surprise. Imani, my God, they let you out. How are you? How's your health? I'm fine, Chloe, but I need your help. It's about my case. Come in. Tell me about it over some tea. In the cozy kitchen after the children were in bed and her husband had gone to the garage, Imani told Chloe about her suspicions. You seriously think Cairo faked his death? Chloe asked disbelievingly. More than seriously, and I have written proof, but I need to know who was buried under my husband's name. Imi, that was 8 years ago. Do you think I remember every body check? Chloe, you know it was a big case. Killing, trial. You don't forget that. Chloe became thoughtful. You know, I do remember that case because it was strange. The body came in bad condition, severe head hurt. And also what? The identification wasn't done by a family member. A man came, said he was the dead man's business partner. His last name was, what was it? Theon. Yes, the family identify him. He said the dead man had no parents. The wife was being investigated. His paperwork was in order. He had okay from the detective. Chloe, do you remember anything specific about that body? Any marks, scars, moles? Chloe recalled with effort. Yes, there was one detail. The dead man had a tattoo on his chest. Small but noticeable. An anchor with the words Seawolf. Imani felt a chill in her chest. Chloe, are you sure? Of course, I'm sure. I write down all tattoos in the report. It's an important mark. My husband never had tattoos. He hated them. Chloe looked at her friend in confusion. But how? If it's not your husband, then who is it? That's what I need to find out. Chloe, are the body check records still kept? They should be in the records, but I can't just walk in there. You need official okay. And unofficially. Chloe paused. Imani, it's too risky. If they find out I showed record papers to outsiders. Please. I spent 8 years in prison for a crime I didn't do. Help me find the truth. All right. I have the night shift tomorrow around 2 o'clock in the morning. No one will be around. You can come, but only for half an hour, no more. The next day, Imani spent the day in tense waiting. She could no longer work at the cemetery. It was too dangerous. Instead, she and Elena studied the found papers, trying to find more clues. The letter from Alex Romano mentioned a meeting place. Where could that be? And what papers did he hide in the grave? At 2 o'clock in the morning, Imani went to the service entrance of the hospital. Chloe was waiting for her in the hallway of the body check department. Quickly, while the guard is in the other wing, she whispered. In the records, Chloe quickly found the needed folder. Here. Case 127. Dio, Cairo. Imani opened the folder with shaking hands. It held pictures of the body check report, and the death paper. The pictures weren't great quality, but the tattoo on the chest was clearly visible. An anchor with the words, Seawolf, exactly as Chloe described. This is definitely not my husband, Imani said. Then who is it? Imani carefully studied the report. Dead person's age about 30 to 35. Height 5 feet 9 inches. Build average. Special marks. Tattoo on the chest. A scar on the left arm 3 centimeters long. Chloe, where could this person have come from? Where could Theon have found a body that matched the age and build? I don't know, maybe a homeless person or someone who died from too much drugs. And how can we find out this person's name? Only through fingerprints or DNA, but fingerprints were only taken from criminals, and the DNA list didn't exist yet back then. Suddenly, Imani noticed a small note in the corner of the report. Sent from City Morgue No. 2. Cause of death, overdose of illegal drugs, name not known. Chloe, look, this person came from another morgue as an unknown person. Yes, that happens. If a person dies on the street and has no papers, they send them to the morgue as unknown. After some time they are buried at public cost and records are kept. Surely Morgue No. 2 must have an entry book. You could contact people there. Chloe thought about it. I could try. My old co-worker Irene works there, but it's also a risk. Please try. It's very important. The next day, Chloe called Imani. Irene agreed to help. She found an entry in the book. Unknown male brought to the morgue on March 10th. Found near the train station. Cause of death, overdose of illegal drugs, about age 30, tattoo on the chest and anchor. And did anyone try to identify him? No. Irene says there are many cases like that. Such people die and their family either don't know or don't want to get involved. Chloe, this person could have been from another city. It's very possible. From the tattoo, you could guess he had some link to the Navy or just like the sea theme. Imani thanked her friend and began to think about the information. So Cairo found the body of an unknown man that matched the age and build. Cairo faked his own death, brought in the stranger's body, and she was framed for killing. But one thing she still didn't understand. How was the setup done technically? After all, she remembered the blood. She remembered Cairo lying on the floor not moving. Maybe he really was hurt, but not killed. And then, while Imani was not awake, they replaced his body with the stranger's body. There had been enough time for that. The ambulance and police only arrived an hour after the neighbors heard the screaming. Now, she had solid proof that Cairo was alive, but where to look for him and how to officially prove her innocence. Imani realized she couldn't handle this alone. She needed help from professionals, police, experts. But first, she needed to find Cairo himself, alive and well, hiding under a false name. After the discoveries in the hospital records, Imani realized she needed help finding Cairo. On her own, finding a person hiding under a false name in another country was impossible. Elena had a friend, the private detective Naomi Ruiz, who was good at finding people. Naomi agreed to help, but warned that her services weren't cheap. "I have connections in different offices," Naomi explained. "I can check lists, passport offices, border services, but I have to be paid for the information." Imani had a very small amount of money, but Elena offered to lend her the needed sum. Naomi started working with energy. In 3 days, she called with the first results. "Your Alex Romano is a real person, but the interesting thing is that all the papers he used to get his passport were fake." "How did you find that out?" "I have a friend in the passport office. By the way, I paid him well to check the papers. The birth paper is fake. The registration paper, too. All done very professionally, but fake." "And where is he now?" "Officially, he left for Turkey. He hasn't appeared on US ground in a long time, but I have connections in travel companies. I'll try to find out the details." A few days later, Naomi brought big news. "Your Alex Romano is living in Antalya. He owns a group of restaurants. He is married to a local woman. They have a son. He lives under the name Alex Romano. He slightly changed his last name for ease." Imani felt faint. So, Cairo really was alive. He had a new family, a new life built with stolen money and at the cost of her ruined life. "What should we do now?" Elena asked. "We have to force him to come back to the US, Imani said decisively, "and admit what he did." "But how? He's not stupid. He won't come back on his own." Imani remembered the letter she found in Theon's papers. It mentioned papers hidden in the grave. Perhaps those papers held great value for Cairo. "Naomi, can we contact Alex Romano by phone, for example?" "We can. I have the number for his restaurant." "Why?" "I want to offer him a deal." The next day, Imani dialed the international number. A male voice with a special accent answered. "Hello, Russian Courtyard Restaurant. May I speak to Alex Romano, please?" "One moment." After a short while, a familiar voice came on the phone. "I'm listening." "Hello, Cairo." A long pause. Then, "Who is this?" "Your wife. The one who served 8 years for your killing." An even longer pause. "I don't know what you're talking about. You have the wrong number." "No, I don't have the wrong number. I know everything. I know about the bank robbery, about the fake papers, and I know that in your grave lies a dead man with a seawolf tattoo." The silence was so long that Imani thought he had hung up. "What do you want?" Cairo finally asked. "To meet and talk. I'm not coming to the US. I think it's in your best interest. After all, I have something you need." "What exactly?" "The papers from your grave. The very ones you asked Theon to get in a few years." Another pause. "How do you know about the papers?" "I have your letters with Maxwell. All of them." "What are you proposing?" "Come to New York City. We'll meet in a public place. You get your papers and I get a written confession that you faked your death." "You're crazy. I'm not admitting to anything." "Then your papers will end up with Interpol and the Turkish police. I think they'll be interested to know who Alex Romano really is and where he got the money for his restaurant business." A long pause. Imani could hear Cairo breathing heavily. "What promises do I have that you won't set a trap for me?" "I'm not Theon. I just need justice. You admit to faking your death. I get cleared and then everyone lives their own life. And if you don't come, then I'll hand over all the papers to the district lawyer's office and Interpol. They'll find you sooner or later." Cairo was silent, thinking about the offer. "Where is the meeting?" he finally asked. "In New York, at a coffee shop in a shopping mall, a busy place. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." "I can't do tomorrow. The day after tomorrow." "All right, I'll be waiting." Imani gave him the address and hung up. Her hands were shaking with tension. She knew she was taking a huge risk. Cairo could bring people with him or not show up at all. Are you sure this is the right choice? Lena asked. It could be dangerous. There's no other way out. If he doesn't come, I'll really hand everything over to the district lawyer. And if he comes, I'll try to convince him to make the right choice. Naomi suggested setting up the meeting to make Imani as safe as possible. We'll choose a coffee shop with a good view. I'll sit at a nearby table. At the smallest sign of danger, I'll call mall security. Imani agreed. She had no experience in such matters, and a professional's help was a must. The day before the meeting, Imani went to the cemetery one last time as a worker. Victor had been let out of the hospital and was back at work. He looked weak but was getting better. Imani, thank you for looking after Lumi. And what about those people? They haven't shown up again. I think they won't be back. I have information about them that will stop them. And you're not coming back to work. No, Victor. I need to finish something. Something very important. She said goodbye to him and to little Lumi, who gave her a drawing. A woman with a bunch of flowers next to a monument. That's you, Auntie Imani, the girl explained. You're a good person. Imani could barely hold back her tears. These people had become dear to her in a short time, and tomorrow it would be decided whether she could get her stolen life back or if everything would stay the same. On the day of the meeting, Imani arrived in New York City on the morning bus. Her worry was so strong that she had barely eaten anything since the morning. In her hands, she carried a small bag with copies of all the papers she had managed to find. The Hudson Center Mall in downtown Manhattan was chosen for a reason. A crowd of people, security cameras, and guards. The coffee shop was on the second floor with a good view of the whole shopping area. Naomi arrived 30 minutes before the set time and sat at a table in the opposite corner of the cafe. Imani took a seat by the window from which she could see the escalator. Exactly at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a man in a dark suit and sunglasses came up the escalator. Imani recognized him instantly. It was Cairo. He had changed in 8 years. He was tanned, had gained weight, and wrinkles had appeared around his eyes, but his walk and manner were the same. He looked around, spotted Imani, and slowly walked to her table. He sat down opposite her without taking off his sunglasses. Hello, Imani. Hello, Cairo. They looked at each other for a few seconds. Imani tried to understand what she felt toward this person who was once her husband. Anger, hate, pain. Mostly just emptiness. You look good, Cairo said. Prison didn't break you. Don't make small talk. Get to the point. Fine. Where are the papers? First you answer some questions. Why did you do this? Cairo took off his sunglasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. His eyes were still gray, but now they showed tiredness and fear. I needed a lot of money. Fast. For what? I had debts. Huge debts. What kind of debts? Cairo paused. Gambling debts. I lost a large sum to the wrong people. They said either you pay back $1.5 million by the end of the month or what? They were going to kill me. So you faked your death to save your life. Partially. If I had just disappeared, they would have come after you. If I died, what was the point of taking revenge on the widow? But then why did I end up in prison? That wasn't supposed to happen. Cairo leaned across the table toward her. The plan was different. You were supposed to find my body, call the police. And then the search was supposed to find that it was an accident. What went wrong? Thean messed up. He hit you too hard. You were not awake for too long, and when you woke up, you started screaming that you didn't remember anything. That seemed suspicious. So Thean was the one who hit me. Yes. According to the plan, he was supposed to just lightly stun you so you wouldn't get in the way of the body switch, but the hit was harder than planned. Imani felt a wave of clarity. She finally knew the truth about that night. And they decided that if I was charged with killing, it was even better. No one would look for other versions. Cairo lowered his eyes, guilty. I didn't want you to go to prison. I thought the lawyer would find a way to prove your innocence. 8 years, Cairo. 8 years of my life. Forgive me. It's too late for forgiveness. Now, tell me, where are the papers you hid in the grave? What papers? I didn't hide anything in the grave. Imani looked at him in surprise. Don't lie. I have your letter to Theon where you write about the agreement about the grave, and that important papers will need to be gotten from there in a few years. Show me that letter. Imani took the copy out of her bag. Cairo read it carefully and frowned. This is not my letter. How is it not yours? The signature is yours. A. Romano. The signature might be mine, but I didn't write the letter. I never called myself Romano in letters with Maxwell. And I didn't hide any papers in the grave. Then who wrote this letter? I have no idea. But if someone opened the grave looking for papers, that person was wrong. Imani thought about it. So the letter was a fake. But why would someone need to fake letters between Cairo and Theon? Cairo. Where is Theon now? I don't know. After the bank robbery we split up. I went to Turkey. He went somewhere in Europe. It's not known where. We haven't talked since. And how did you split the money? Half and half. $25 million each. And you opened the restaurant business with that money? Yes. What else was I supposed to do? There was no turning back. Suddenly, Imani noticed that Cairo was constantly looking around. He was clearly nervous and in a hurry. Did you come alone? Yes. Well, in a way, yes. What do you mean, in a way? Listen, Imani, let's finish this quickly. Give me the papers you have and I'll sign any confession. Just make it fast. Why are you in such a hurry? Who are you afraid of? Cairo didn't answer, but his worry was catching. Imani looked around and noticed that Naomi was also looking worriedly in their direction. Cairo, what's going on? I was followed from Turkey. Someone found out I was flying to New York. It's possible they're here. Who are they? I don't know. Maybe Theon's people or maybe those same moneylenders I once hid from. At that moment, 2 men walked to their table. Imani recognized them immediately. They were the same people who came to the cemetery and poisoned Victor. Cairo Dio, the tall one with the mole on his cheek said. What a small world. We've been looking for you for a long time. Cairo turned pale. I don't know you. But we know you and very well. You owe us money. A lot of it. The second whiter man sat down next to Cairo, blocking his way out. And this, I guess, is your wife. The tall one nodded toward Imani. The one who killed you. Funny story. What do you want? Imani asked, trying to speak calmly. We want the money your husband stole from our bank. $50 million plus interest for 8 years. We work for some investors in the Bank of the Americas, private investors who don't like publicity. Imani understood that she had walked into a real trap. These people were clearly not joking and there was no help to be expected. I don't have that much money, Cairo said. The restaurant makes money, but not that much. That's your problem. You have 2 weeks to find the money. Or what? Or we tell the Turkish police who Alex Romano really is, and at the same time we tell the U.S. lawyer's office where to find the brought-back-to-life dead man. The tall man took an envelope from his pocket and put it on the table. Here are our contact details. 2 weeks, Dio, no more. The men stood up and left as suddenly as they had appeared. Cairo sat pale and confused. Who were they? Imani asked. I have no idea. But they know everything about me. Cairo. What if they're Theon's people? Maybe he decided to get rid of you. I don't know. Maybe. Listen. What if we join forces? You help me officially prove my innocence and I help you find the real guilty ones of the robbery. What do you mean real guilty ones? You and Maxwell robbed the bank. I'm sure of it. But maybe someone used you. Maybe Theon didn't even come up with the robbery plan. Cairo looked at her thoughtfully. You know, now that you mention it, the robbery plan was actually too detailed for Maxwell. He's not that smart. And also what? When we split the money, he turned out to have more information about banking systems than I expected, as if someone had explained everything to him in detail. So, they had another helper possibly. And possibly he's demanding the money back now. Imani realized the matter was much more complicated than she thought. But now she had a helper, even if an unwilling one, who was interested in showing the truth. All right, Cairo. We'll work together, but on one condition. You sign a written confession about faking your death right now. Cairo nodded. I'll sign it. I have no choice left. The next day, Imani and Cairo met in a cheap motel room on the edge of New York City. Cairo wrote and signed a detailed confession in which he described the whole plan of faking his death. The paper was made official by a notary. The notary didn't ask extra questions for the right pay. Now you can go to the district lawyer and demand a new look at the case, Cairo said. You have all the proof of your innocence in my death. Not so fast. First, we need to find out who is behind those threats. Otherwise, they'll kill you, and I'll be without a witness again. They began to look at all the available information. Naomi, the private detective, agreed to help them for an extra pay. Judging by the behavior of those people, they are professionals, she said. They work for large groups that have access to lists and connections in various offices. What if they are workers of the same bank? Imani suggested. Maybe someone from management set up the robbery using Cairo and Thean as the doers. Possibly. We need to look into who worked at the bank at that time who had access to the security systems. Detective Naomi spent several days gathering information. The results were interesting. The head boss of the Bank of the Americas, Garrett Fierro, had been fired half a year after the robbery. The official reason: disagreements with the owners. The unofficial one: suspicion of being involved in the robbery. And where is he now? That's the interesting part. He moved to Cyprus, opened an advice company there, lives very richly, although he couldn't have such official income. And what about the bank's head tax person? Solange Casas also quit. Now she works at a private checking firm, but her way of life is also suspiciously high. So half the bank's management got suddenly rich after the robbery. Exactly. And now listen to the most interesting part. I found information that Fierro and Casas met with Thean several times, even before the robbery. There are witnesses. Imani and Cairo exchanged looks. So they were in on it from the beginning, Cairo said. They used Maxwell and me as the doers and they stayed on the sidelines. And then they decided to get rid of the witnesses and take all the money for themselves, Imani added. But how do we prove it? Naomi smiled. Maybe we don't have to prove it. If my guesses are correct, Thean is alive and hiding somewhere in Europe. We need to find him and make him talk. The search for Thean took another week. Finally, Naomi reported, Maxwell Thean is in Montenegro. He lives under the name Mark Thean. He runs a small building business, but the amounts in his accounts do not match his said income. Can we contact him? We can. I have his phone number. Imani decided to call Thean herself. He didn't answer right away, and his voice was careful. I'm listening. Maxwell. It's Imani Dio. Long pause. Imani. But you're in prison. I'm out. I found out the whole truth about that night. I know Cairo is alive. I know about the bank robbery. What do you want? To meet and talk. We have common enemies. What enemies? The ones who forced you to rob the bank. Fierro and Casas. Another pause. How do you know those names? I guessed. Maxwell. They are using the same people against Cairo who poisoned the groundskeeper at the cemetery. I think they're after you too. You know too much. Thean was silent, thinking about what he'd heard. What do you propose? We join together. We tell the truth and turn in the real organizers of the robbery. I can't come back to the US. They'll arrest me. And if you don't come back, they'll kill you. Choose. I need time to think. There's no time. Cairo was given 2 weeks to find the money. Half the time is already over. All right, we'll meet in a neutral place in Belgrade the day after tomorrow night. Imani agreed. She didn't have an international passport, but Naomi promised to solve that problem in a day. 2 days later, the three of them, Imani, Cairo, and Naomi, were sitting in a Belgrade hotel restaurant, waiting for Theon. He arrived an hour late, looking nervous and constantly looking around. "Maxwell," Imani greeted him. "Thanks for coming." "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing," he said, sitting down at the table. "If they find out I met with you." "Who are they?" "Fiero and Cassis." "Yes, they have people everywhere. They know everything that happens." "Maxwell, tell us everything from the beginning," Cairo asked. "Who really set up the robbery?" Theon was silent for a long time, fighting with himself. Finally he spoke. "It was their idea from the beginning. Fiero came to me in early 2016. He said the bank was in a difficult spot. Owners were demanding results and there was nothing to show. And what did he propose? To set up a robbery. To take money from accounts that were officially listed as stolen, but actually to divide it among the people in the job. And where did Cairo come in? Fiero said they needed a manager who would help from the inside. Cairo was right. He had debts. He could be forced. What debts? He was taking out loans at other banks against fake income papers. If that came out, he would have gone to jail for trickery. Imani looked at Cairo. He lowered his eyes, guilty. "And why was it necessary to fake your death?" Imani asked her husband. "That was also Fiero's idea," Theon answered. "He said after the robbery, there would be a police check. If Cairo was still alive, they might start suspecting him. If he died shortly before the robbery, he would be a victim rather than a suspect. But why did they frame me? That wasn't planned. According to the plan, Cairo's death was supposed to look like an accident. But when you were arrested, Fiero said it was even better. Fewer questions would be asked." Imani felt a wave of rage rise within her. These people not only stole millions, but they calmly watched an innocent woman go to prison. And what happened after the robbery? "We split the money as agreed, but half a year later, Fiero demanded more. Said he had to be paid extra for silence. I refused. Then he threatened to turn me over to the police." "And what did you do?" "I left for Montenegro. I thought it would be safer there, but they found me there too. They are demanding that I hand over everything I have." "Maxwell," Naomi said, "do you have papers that confirm Fiero and Cassis's link to the robbery?" "I do. I kept them as a safety, recordings of phone talks, email letters, bank papers." "Then we have a chance," Imani said decisively. "We collect all the proof and go to the district lawyer at the same time in the US and in Montenegro. And if they find us first, they won't find us. I have connections in the police," Naomi assured them. "We can set up witness safety." Theon agreed. He had no choice. Either turn in the organizers of the crime or hide from their revenge for the rest of his life. A week later, Imani was sitting in the office of the district lawyer's investigator in New York City, giving a statement. Next to her was the state-given lawyer, this time an experienced and principled person. "Imani," the investigator said, studying the papers, "the materials you gave are more than convincing. Your case will be looked at again as quickly as possible. And what about the real criminals? Fiero and Cassis have already been put on an international wanted list. Their money and things have been frozen. I think they will soon be sent back to the US. And Cairo and Theon have agreed to work with the search. Considering that they came forward on their own and helped uncover a larger crime, their punishments will be made lighter." A month later, the court officially said Imani was innocent of her husband's killing. The case was closed for lack of proof of a crime. Also, the court said she had the right to payment for wrong conviction. The payment amount was $8 million, $1 million for each year of illegal prison time. It was a huge amount of money for Imani, but it couldn't bring back the stolen years of her life. Fiero and Cassis were arrested in Cyprus and sent back to the US. The search found that they not only set up the Bank of the Americas robbery, but were also involved in several other large thefts. They were given long prison sentences. Cairo got a 3-year held-back sentence for taking part in trickery. Thean got off with 2 years in a low-security prison. The people who threatened Cairo and poisoned Victor turned out to be Fiero's hired men. After their boss's arrest, they disappeared and were not seen again. Victor got completely better and kept working as the groundskeeper at the cemetery. When Imani came to say goodbye to him before leaving the city, he said, "Imani, thank you for not giving up. If it weren't for you, we would have kept living in fear. Thank you, Victor and Lumi. If it weren't for your daughter, I would never have found out the truth." Little Lumi gave Imani a new drawing. This time the woman wasn't next to a grave, but walking down a path toward the bright sun. "That's you going toward your new life, Auntie Imani," the girl explained. Imani bought Victor and Lumi a studio apartment near the cemetery and bought the girl everything she needed for school. They had become her true family, people who believed in her innocence and helped her get justice. Imani sent part of her payment to the Legal Help Center for the Wrongly Convicted, where she also began working as a specialist. She understood that there were many people in the country who, like her, had become victims of court mistakes or criminals. "Everyone has the right to justice," she told newspaper writers, "and everyone has the right to a second chance." Cairo returned to Turkey with his new family. Before leaving, he met with Imani one last time. "Forgive me for everything that happened," he said. "I know words can't fix what you went through. I forgive you, Cairo. Not for what you did, but for helping to make things right. What will you do next?" "Live. Truly live. Not just exist." They parted without regrets. The love that once joined them had long since died. But in its place came mutual understanding and forgiveness. Imani moved to Manhattan and fully gave herself to working at the Legal Help Center. She found new friends, new interests, and a new sense of purpose. The 8 stolen years couldn't be brought back, but she could make sure they weren't wasted for nothing. Elena Vasquez became her closest friend and helper at the center. Naomi joined their team as a private detective good at finding proof of innocence. In Imani's first year of work, the Last Truth Center helped get the clearing of 17 wrongly convicted people. Every new win over unfairness brought Imani more joy than all the money in the world. One October day, exactly 1 year after her release, Imani went back to the city cemetery, but this time not to Cairo's grave. The unknown man who finally found peace and his name, Duane Morales, now lay there. It was found through his tattoo that he had served in the Navy and had disappeared without a trace several years earlier. His mother, whom they found through military records, was finally able to say goodbye to her son. Imani went to Iona's grave, the same older woman who supported her in prison, and said that the truth inevitably rises to the top like oil on water. "Thank you, Iona," she said softly, putting flowers on the simple marker. "You were right. The truth really did come to the surface." Next to the grave stood a middle-aged man in a sharp suit. Seeing Imani, he walked to her. "Excuse me. Are you Imani Dio?" "Yes, I am." "And who are you?" "Marcus King. My wife is serving time for a killing she didn't do. I heard about your center and would like to ask for help." Imani looked closely at the man. In his eyes, she saw the same pain and hopelessness that once hurt her. "Tell me about your wife's case." "It's a long story." "I have time." Imani smiled. "All the time in the world." They walked toward the cemetery exit, talking about the new case. A simple but reliable car was waiting for them behind the fence. On the back seat lay a folder with papers from another case of court mistake. Imani got behind the wheel and looked in the rearview mirror at the getting far away cemetery. 8 years ago, she had left this place as a broken woman accused of killing. Today she was leaving as a person who had found her calling and was ready to help others in the search for justice. The car drove away heading toward a new life, new cases, and wins over unfairness. And in Imani's pocket still lay the small medallion of Saint Teresa, a reminder that the truth wins sooner or later, no matter how deep they try to bury it. Imani Dio's story ended, but the story of the Last Truth Center was just beginning. And somewhere in the U.S., innocent people were behind bars who still didn't know that hope existed. The hope that the truth will rise to the surface like oil on water. Because justice is not a luxury but a need, and every person has a right to it no matter the situation.